All right, what's up? Welcome in GC Live, Wednesday episode of the show. Wes Mitchell, Chris Clark here. Of course, transfer portal continues on. I know a lot of people, Chris, were waiting on the transfer portal giveth part of this show, and we've at least reached part of that. I think you can safely say South Carolina, after having to deal with the other side, the taketh away. The commitment starting to roll in as they tend to do for South Carolina. Maybe this is the case for everybody, Chris, but it certainly seems like for South Carolina, these things come in bunches, and the Gamecocks currently on a little bit of a commitment roll. We, of course, will get into all that, but first, want to invite you to check out our buddy Clint Hammond of Movement Mortgage if you're in the market for a new home. 803-771-6933. Call Clint. He is a mortgage broker here in Columbia, but can help you no matter where you are in the great state of South Carolina. Clint, big supporter of our show, big Gamecock fan. And Clint, I'm sure, very, very happy today as South Carolina continuously gets some good news. The very latest being Jaden McGowan going public with his commitment to South Carolina. But Chris, even though that's the most recent news, we probably have to start this show with the news, the word that Rocket Sanders, let's get it right, expected to commit to South Carolina at this point. And still, as of 2:04 p.m. Eastern time, Wednesday, has not gone public. But once he does, will be a massive, massive get for the Gamecocks. We'll get into what all it means, but shoot, dude, this is a perception get, I think, for the Gamecocks as well.
Yeah, no doubt. This is the one that a lot of people have been waiting on, Wes. You see this in the portal. Guys that come from other SEC schools, guys that are former 4-stars, former 5-stars. Even if there hasn't necessarily been a lot of college production, those are the guys that you like to see. Well, with Rocket, big-time recruit, SEC school, it's safe to say, Wes, he's had a good bit of production in his career. 2022 season, the year that South Carolina went to Fayetteville and returned home with a loss, Rocket Sanders was a big part of that, had 1,400 yards that season. And this was just really, I think, a dream scenario for South Carolina West, where you can get a player at a position of great need, that has ties to your staff, jump in. But you're right. I mean, this one's made waves, Wes. This is one that, more national people are going to be talking about, more people regionally, more people kind of in the SEC landscape. And, of course, a great impact get for South Carolina, but also one that, is raising some eyebrows and turning some heads on the recruiting front.
For sure, man. And I think, Chris, you look at Rocket, and you sort of alluded to this a second ago, but sometimes you do see the guys that are like, all right, I remember that name out of high school. We recruited that guy. Even, nowadays, as much as the portal has become a factor in things, you see fans even say, oh, we missed on him now. Let's go get him in 2 years. And so with Rocket has actually been a dream transfer commit for South Carolina. I would say before it was even a real possibility that he was ever even going to hit the portal. Like, I remember last year, dream scenarios that involved Rocket Sanders ending up in Columbia. And so come to find out, some kind of full circle things here as far as him being a target for the Gamecocks way back then. And I think we knew he was good. We knew he had a chance to be good, but literally that 2022 year was one of the best in the SEC, which means you're one of the best in the country, certainly one of the most productive, and, just kind of came into his own. This past season, you had injuries, you had a change in offense. I would say it was a much different offensive sort of structure and scheme of what they were trying to do, and he was banged up. So did not have the year he expected. Sounds like he probably wanted a fresh start, and now he's going to get that at South Carolina. But I think credit the staff here because, this is the number 2 running back in the transfer portal, according to the On3 industry ranking, which sort of averages everything together. And, ETN from Florida, according to those rankings, the number 1 running back in the transfer portal. So I think you look at just getting a national guy like that, and Chris, this is a position South Carolina needed the upgrade at. So kind of just take all that together. It made a lot of sense, but it was big. It'd be big regardless, but it wouldn't be quite as big if you had like 2 5-star running backs returning and Rocket was just going to be competing for time. This was a need for South Carolina, and credit to them. The moment he hit the portal, Carolina jumped at the opportunity to try to get him on campus.
Yeah, absolutely. Got on it very quickly, and that was expected, Wes. I mean, um, schools around the country, sometimes there's surprise entries to the portal. Sometimes you kind of are wondering if it's a possibility, monitoring a possibility. A lot of news goes around like that through the grapevine, and you got to be prepared. And so South Carolina obviously had the benefit of, in this case, when Rocket did hit the portal, they're able to move quickly because they had those connections and they had that familiarity. And, one thing we saw Wes last season at running back, and I don't want to discount anything that Mario Anderson did. Man, he ended up being so important for South Carolina this year. Let's be frank. Just because he's not going to play for the Gamecocks next year, I don't think we need to go back and discount what he did. He stepped in and gave a run game that was really, really struggling a jolt. Did some great things for the Gamecocks down the stretch when he got his opportunities. But you kind of look back at the last portal cycle at running back. South Carolina did get Anderson very early, but then after that, we knew that the staff ideally wanted to go sign a second back, and they didn't do that, right? South Carolina had another few guys on campus from the portal, but didn't end up closing on one. This time around, it wasn't really an option. Like you didn't need to. I think you said it well on the Insiders Forum the other day. South Carolina seemed bound and determined not to get into that same situation as last year. So that meant you're going to go try to find a big time guy. And this one made obviously the most sense in the world. And you're also going to take some volume, man. So you've got two committed in Rocket Sanders and Oscar AdAway. It may not stop there. You may see another guy from the portal in addition to Matt Fuller. And that wouldn't be a surprise at all. South Carolina is still juggling some other portal options, but you didn't want to take a chance on, hey, we like these couple backs out of the portal. Let's bring them in. They seem like pretty good backs, depth pieces. You want to go get a dude this time. And that's what they got in Rocket Sanders. And they also landed a guy that I like a good bit in Oscar AdAway, who I think actually has some similarities to Mario Anderson.
Yeah, Chris, you can find backs in the portal. You can find running backs if you're creative, kind of all over the place. Now, I don't know if you quite can find many quite like Rocket. That's a situation where, to me, he's above and beyond. But now, do you want to fill out that room with some other guys? I think Oscar AdAway is a perfect example of, maybe let's be frank. This is not a shot. Not quite the upside, maybe not quite the NFL skill set as a Rocket Sanders, but a guy that can come in, can play ball in the SEC. You think, based on what you've seen with what he did at North Texas, has experience, runs with some physicality. We're going to get into, I don't want to just make Oscar AdAway a side note to talking about Rocket Sanders. We're going to have a full segment on him because I think he deserves it. We're going to talk about Jaden McGowan, that commitment as well, as these things have started to sort of roll through. You're seeing the fruits of the labor from over the weekend, where South Carolina did have really all these guys on campus, and now it's kind of playing out to where they're committing here the last 24 hours or so. But I do want, Chris, for us to address first, just like elephant in the room, because I know we're going to get asked 100 times before the show is over. Slight exaggeration, but
No.
the Juice Wells rumor that is out there. And, I'll let you sort of take over wherever you want. But my answer to people has just been like, look, the door, if you want to use that, the door is open verbiage, I guess. I don't know if the door was ever like slammed shut. And there's probably you said this off air, Chris. I'll just steal it. There were like there's probably been multiple occasions during this where the door maybe creaked open a little bit more, and then the door shut a little bit more, and then it creaked. Like that's happened multiple times. Just like even before, even before Juice officially went in the portal, I feel like the door kind of swung back and forth a little bit. So, yeah, is it, I guess, accurate to say at times during this process that the door has been open for Juice Wells to come back? Yes, I think that is accurate to say. It feels like it would still take a lot.
Yes.
Let's be clear, from all sides. Like I think it would take some compromise from all sides. Kind of like a let's hug it out. We're family.
Yeah.
Let's figure this out.
Yes.
I know NIL is like naturally what people talk about with this. I'm not even specifically talking about that. I think there are some hurt feelings on all sides of this thing just because of how it's played out, the reaction to Juice going in the portal. Like it's just a sticky situation, man. So I still think it would take some pretty big steps for it to end up back with him ever suiting up at South Carolina again.
Yeah, it's kind of like a breakup, right? That, I don't want to say it was like saying it was nasty is not the right characterization, but complicated, somewhat messy. Yes. And so I think some people are getting the idea that it's as simple as Juice saying, "Hey, I'm going in the portal. That's it. No contact. Nothing happens." And then him calling back and saying, "Hey, I'm thinking about coming back. Would that be cool? Yeah, that'd be cool. Okay, I'm coming back." It's not that is just not even close to the truth here. I think you did characterize it well. There's not really a change in this proverbial door being open from the day he went in the portal. Like nothing has really changed for that from the day he went in the portal to now. The door isn't much more cracked now than it was then, if any. I think the one thing that is different is that when Juice went in the portal, I do think that something happened that has happened in other situations, which is maybe the market is not what you would anticipate, right? For a player of that magnitude. And there can be a lot of different reasons for that. That also doesn't mean that if he ever did come back to South Carolina, that it's like this second, like it would just circle back to that if it ever happened, right? Point is, door has always been a little open. Like it's never been totally off the table that Juice Wells could return. Is it likely today? It is not, because of the reasons you said, Wes. It was there would be a lot on both sides that would have to change. There'd have to be a lot of shifts in this whole thing for it to happen. So I think it's gotten mischaracterized a little bit. And I don't blame anybody. It's just when something like this starts on social media, on YouTube, on the Insiders Forum, wherever, and it proliferates, it kind of turns into, hey, it looks like he may return, or there's a good chance he'll return. And that's not, I mean, sitting here right now, that is not the case. Are there still conversations with people in Columbia? Yes, there have been, but that did not just start today, right? There's always been some level of communication. So not a 0% chance. And again, that's the same as it has been, not a 0% chance, but not a very high chance either. Next time we're on the show, Friday, tomorrow, Monday, could this level have been adjusted up or even down more? Yes, it could.
Yeah. I mean, I think at just about any point during this process, you could have rolled something out there and said, hey, the door's still cracked here. And that probably at most points would have been somewhat true. So, I think really, and we're in, Chris, we're in new times at this point. So, the portal, NIL, all this stuff is still settling. It's still kind of settling into what the norms are going to be. And, I think there's a very strong case to, hey, family hugs it out and figures things out. I think there's a strong case, man, frankly, to not setting precedents of, hey, you can go in the portal, but we'll just take anybody back at any time. So, I think this comment right here, how would the locker room, how would the team feel about it too? If it even got to that point. I don't think we're even to that point yet, but if it did, that would be part of this equation to me as well. There's no doubt a healthy Juice Wells can help a South Carolina football team. Let's be clear about that. But
Sure.
there are a lot of other things that come into play with these decisions. So yeah, that's kind of how we'll address that. We'll address it head on. Not going to ignore questions. If people I'm sure people will hop in later on and we'll see the questions. They can kind of revert back to, I guess, about the 10-minute mark. I just don't want to make a show about guys committing and transfer portal options end up all about something that probably isn't even going to happen at this point anyway. So, Chris, let's go back. Let's go to AdAway, man. And this is a guy, as we talked about this on Monday's show, because we already knew South Carolina was in great shape. This thing happened really quick. Like, he hit the portal late last week. Next thing you know, I think it was Wilt Fong from over at 24/7. He broke the news, hey, he's going to be in Columbia. And then we quickly heard, hey, like during the weekend, hey, South Carolina's in great shape here. This guy is heavily leaning to South Carolina. He apparently his mom didn't get to make the trip, so he had told me he wanted to just get back and talk to her and just kind of make sure. But he commits to South Carolina last night. This was a very no nonsense kind of quick recruitment for South Carolina. But I think if we all kind of just slot Rocket as the number one guy, he's going to start next year if healthy. If he's himself, he's going to start. But AdAway, you make a strong case, man, that he quickly can kind of be that second half of your 1-2 punch in the backfield and can fill it quite well. Like I think, are there similarities here to Mario Anderson? I think there kind of are. From a skill set standpoint, I haven't been able to find enough of AdAway online. You're kind of picking, a clip from here, a clip from there to try to put it all together. But I think there's just a versatile skill set with him, and that he's going to give you a tough-nosed, physical, experienced runner.
He will, man. And I think, look, we were talking about differences in the transfer portal cycle last year as opposed to this one. You start to look at the picture of this running back room, and it looks rosier for the 2024 season than it did going into 2023, right? Where you're relying on, you're kind of like, who is going to be the starter? We were going into last year going, all right, probably Mario Anderson or DeCarrion Joyner, who, remember, entered the season as the starting running back, but had never played the position. He had only played it in spring ball. Different outlook this time, right? With Rocket Sanders, Oscar AdAway, a guy who's taken plenty of carries in college and has averaged, 6 yards a carry throughout his college career. Pretty good numbers. And not 6 yards a carry on, hey, I got 25 carries throughout an entire season, right? Like actually carrying the football a good bit, good numbers. A kind of a shorter, stockier type of guy, but a guy that can also run, and has good vision, probably a little faster than people are crediting him for. And you pair those guys with Matt Fuller from the recruiting class, who has the look of a very good freshman. And then you've still got Juju McDowell, and you're going to have a DJ Braswell in year 2, as a Gamecock, a guy who has upside and speed and can certainly get better. Point is, the picture starts looking better. And I think AdAway's a really important part of that, because here you have a guy that has a lot of experience, some proven production, and I think Wes has the tool set to where his skills could translate to this level pretty successfully.
Yeah, man. And hey, you also have to at least acknowledge, in a perfect world, you've got to make contingencies. And Rocket Sanders, I take him 10 times out of 10, but he is coming off some injuries. There may be, it may be a situation where Rocket is having to get back up to speed as well. So I I think you've got to try to build in as many contingencies as you possibly can. And I think that was the problem. South Carolina was kind of holding their breath at that position all last year. Braswell kind of got forced into action late. It had stepped in, made that great block against Kentucky. So I don't want to say he just wasn't ready. He did some good things, and I like your point. I think it's important to acknowledge, hey, Mario Anderson stepped up and did what he needed to do for this team.
Sure.
All else being equal, you would have, it's not like Mario Anderson was kicked to the curb. They wanted him back.
Mm-hmm.
Like, they didn't want him to hit the portal. But once he tells you, "Hey, coach, I'm going to hit the portal," then you go out and you say, "Hey, well, we got to replace you, man." So I think in this case, South Carolina has done a fantastic job of potentially upgrading that room, and certainly just upgrading the depth on it. There's a question from Luke. Wonder if South Carolina can still get Juwan Howell. And Luke, I think that would be fantastic if they could add him and start to kind of layer the classes in terms of eligibility that's left. Wonder if we can still get, to answer your question. I don't know. Wonder if they would really like that. I think the answer is yes.
Right. Yeah, no doubt, man. I mean, Jawarn Howell, interesting prospect, right? 6'1", 215, and young. Freshman last year, put up some big numbers. And you go, yeah, we did that in the MEAC. Well, Mario Anderson turned out to be a guy who could make some plays at a big-time level against good competition, and he put up great numbers at a small level as well. And you look at Jawarn Howell, Wes, 102 carries last season, 809 yards, 7 touchdowns. So this is a guy that, put up really, really good numbers. And are you counting on him to come in and be your starter in year one? No. Again, like you said, full expectation as a healthy Rocket Sanders as your starter. But can he be a depth piece? Can he be a guy that's almost your second high school guy in this class? Kind of, sort of. I think so. And so, again, some people may look at the running back situation and go, okay, you've got one in high school in Matt Fuller, go out and try to get another high school back, go get 2 from the portal and call it a day. That could happen, but I also think it's highly possible that if South Carolina could get Jawarn Howell or another back like him that makes sense, they won't hesitate to pull the trigger on that either. Because again, like you said, you don't want to be in a position where you go in 2024 and say, there's just not much depth here in the running back room. It seems they're bound and determined to not let that happen.
Yeah, Dame Nico saying Stokes is in the portal. CJ Stokes, former Hammond standout. I mean, yeah, he'd be a possibility, I think, as maybe one of those late additions. And dude, if they could find a way to get Howell to kind of agree to come in, knowing what else is around him. I mean, I like AdAway, but I think Howell would make life difficult. It's going to be hard for anybody to unseat Rocket, once that's official here. But I think Howell could push for reps and snaps. And it would just be, is he willing to kind of put himself in a spot, knowing you're going to be playing in the SEC, but you're probably going to be fighting for that number 2 position. And hey, dude, if Braswell takes a huge leap, then that's that's fantastic for everybody. If he just beats out some of these guys, then that means it worked, right? It means you have depth. It means you have competition. So I think, you can't get too caught up in worrying about, are you recruiting over a guy or not? I think you got to just pack the room with as many guys as you possibly can. And Howell, clearly, man, this kid can play. So I think that'd be great. By the way, Chris, do you want to tell everybody about a new opportunity if they give us a little bit of their time and info that they could win a big old prize pack?
Big old awesome prize pack. It's from our friends at Ariat, Wes. And for those of y'all that enjoyed the Dayrude appearance at Williams-Brice during Kentucky weekend, I know I did. Our friends at Ariat and the Harrisons, Mr. Harrison, actually a USC letterman, Wes, back in the day, actually, they were responsible for doing that. So you should already support them just because of that, because that was awesome. If y'all remember Kentucky weekend getting Dayrude here. They also have some outstanding products there. Western boots. Wes, you and I are about to have some gear from Ariat, and we're going to show it off on the show. Cannot wait. I'm actually going to put it up right here in the chat. This is the Ultimate USC Fan Survey, something we put together for Gamecock fans to just fill out, give us a little bit of information on you, where you are, what you participate in from a USC standpoint, Gamecock Central, Garnet Trust, Carolina Alumni Association, all that good stuff. And if you let us know, we're going to enter you for a chance to win an Ariat prize pack. Get yourself some boots, some more gear. It's outstanding. So we appreciate our friends, Ricky, the Harrisons, over at Ariat for hooking us up with that. They're helping us bring you the Ultimate USC Fan Survey. Drop the link in. Make sure you go fill it out. No purchase necessary. Go fill it out. Let us know a little about yourself, and we will enter you to win that.
Oh, man. You got some good responses on there. Yeah, go check that out. Appreciate those guys for helping us out, and looking forward to that gear for sure. And hopefully, like Chris said, one of you will win it. So that's cool. But all right, Chris. So let's move this thing forward. By the way, as the transfer portal turns, Kentucky, man, these North Texas guys are just they're cashing in on their big seasons, right? I saw their quarterback, I think, committed to Cal, and
they're flying off the board, man.
He had a big year for them, I think, last year. And so Jamori Macklin is now committed to Kentucky. So there maybe, obviously South Carolina will play Kentucky next year, so it's a little bit noteworthy in terms of that. But man, I also think you start to look at some of the overlap. Like I had, this wasn't Kentucky related, but I had a reporter and a media guy for another SEC school DM me last night after the AdAway commit and said, "Hey, does this have any effect on Rocket?" And because they were trying to, move the puzzle pieces around, and I was like, "No, not a chance. Doesn't affect him at all." But I do wonder. There's some overlap with our guy from Indiana, who South Carolina is trying to bring in this weekend. And Chris, I don't know the last we said on him, on McCullen, or McCulley, I should say. Sorry, y'all. The names are just, there's too many of them at this point. But Donovan McCulley from Indiana. South Carolina would love to be in the mix with him. He visited Kentucky this past week. Kentucky gets Macklin now. Kentucky's been very active in the portal the last couple of cycles. Yep. Worth mentioning. But, Chris, the Kentucky guys seem to think Kentucky, South Carolina, Michigan were the three they were hearing were involved with McCulley. I know South Carolina would love to have him in town, but seems like it's kind of a little bit up in the air, I guess.
Yeah, at one point, I would say, Wes, maybe over the weekend, early part of the week, we were tracking McCulley potentially being in Columbia this coming weekend. Doesn't seem quite as likely with what I've gotten in the past 24 hours. Probably will still work on it, right? Because I think you look at him and he's what, 6'5". There's some other bigger receivers that South Carolina has offered. You look at what they've got committed, right? Jared Brown, who we've already covered in a previous episode. We'll talk about Jaden McGowan. You've got those two guys who are slot type of guys, smaller, speedier, quicker guys. Now you want to add some size, some length to that equation. And so with this other receiver slot or two, and Wes, I think ideally it's two. I think ideally you take two transfer portal receivers. You want to get some size. 6'2", 6'3", 6'4", McCulley 6'5". You look at the guys that are on the board, there are several of those. One that I mentioned today on the Insiders Forum, Chris Brazel II from Tulane. He's a guy that, is I think 6'3". And so you look at that kind of profile when you're monitoring South Carolina's portal activity at receiver. Those are the type guys that we're going to be, I think, tracking the most from our standpoint when it comes to South Carolina.
Yeah, I watched him, what I could find of his film out there. Former quarterback, which is apparently a trend, it appears. That might be something to look at, though, man. How many guys are in the portal that were former quarterbacks and then found their way to another position and have excelled and have been a little bit, no offense, but like better than the school they're at, and now are looking elsewhere. I mean, Gerald Kilgore, who I think is probably going to end up at South Carolina, high school quarterback, started out his college career at QB, made the transition to defensive back, and now, has some Power 5 offers, including from South Carolina. You look at McCullum, he switched over. McCulley, I keep saying his name wrong. Good grief. McCulley had a huge year this past season at Indiana and really came into his own. He's in the portal. And then another guy that we've talked about maybe a little bit here on the show, we've certainly written about him, Brady Hunt, tight end. I think, you start looking at the guys that were in this past weekend, Chris. One of the few guys we sort of started hearing, I guess this would have been Monday, I don't feel great about where they're at, was Neville, the tight end who was in from Harvard. But now Brady Hunt locked in with the official visit this coming weekend. He's confirmed that. And I think, seems like Carolina's in a good spot there.
Yeah, this is a kid that's, like you said, keeping with that former quarterback theme. I think this kid's a potential stud, Wes. He's 6'6", about 250 pounds. Missed last season after he had ankle surgery, but put up big numbers in 2022. And it was pointed out to me, Wes, that in 2022, Ball State played Tennessee that year, and that Brady Hunt, was a guy that they got whooped in that game. It was, I think, 59-10. But that Brady Hunt was a guy that really flashed on film, of a guy that you can see, hey, this guy can play at the SEC level, right? And certainly he had a really good season. You look at the size, he checks that box, 6'6", 249. You like the former quarterback because those guys tend to just see the whole field, so to speak. And then he's kind of a dual threat guy. He can block, he can catch the football. And you've already got Josh Simon coming back. You've got some young guys in the hopper, but you would really, really like to add an experienced piece who can play for you on special teams and at tight end. And Brady Hunt, man, he would fit that bill. Supposed to be on campus on Friday. And I think things look really pretty favorable for South Carolina here.
Yeah, I think that's a position too, man, kind of like running back. You can get creative and you can find guys at that spot at, various, like some people maybe hear Ball State, but then you look at him, this guy's got NFL size, has some upside to him as well. And I think would be a very just resourceful get for South Carolina if that follows through and happens. And, it's a position where they got Josh Simon back. So that's helpful. You got some young guys. You're bringing in a 4-star in Michael Smith, but certainly you could always use more depth, and he could potentially step right in and be in that rotation, I think, with Josh Simon. So we'll see. We'll keep tracking him. And new names continue to pop up. Pretty good chance, I would think, that a name or two pops up before this weekend hits anyway. We'll certainly be continuing to track that on Gamecock Central. Meanwhile, Chris, Lewis Solomon is officially recruitment is shut down. I don't think we necessarily knew that it wasn't shut down. Anyway, I mean, South Carolina had kind of, I guess, had to dodge the final bullets to get to the finish line, but we know that was a close recruitment, and South Carolina in a good spot there to keep him in the class, and a guy that I think will play early. I'm sure we talked about him a long time ago when he flipped to the Gamecocks, but always good to hold on to those guys because you do have, I mean, we talked about this on the board, Chris. You got like Josiah Thompson, for example. He's been as committed as you could possibly be for a big time player. He still had Alabama and Clemson calling to try to make a move on him.
Yep.
So, you never, that's why you have to stay diligent. And you may see on Twitter or Instagram a picture, hey, all the coaches were on an in-home visit. You'd be like, oh, that guy's already committed. Well, you have to stay diligent all the way to signing day. If these guys, even if they seem very, very solid, just to make sure you get there.
Well, and it applies to Solomon, man. I think you put it well. We weren't really tracking like a potential flip or anything, but always had like a little bit of an eye on it because of how it's gone, right? You think of, Wes, you remember that day, you and I exchanging 100 phone calls and texts the day that Jalewis Solomon committed to Auburn. It looked for a long time like South Carolina. Day before, it looks like Auburn. Looks like South Carolina a few minutes before this decision. Boom, now it's Auburn, right? Then he flips to South Carolina. Then there's a little period where you're starting to hear some Auburn things, and that gets shut down. So that was one that given how it had gone, you always kind of keep an eye on that. And so to have no lingering questions going into signing day is something that's really a positive for the Gamecocks. And this is a guy he's a football player. I've been getting a lot of questions actually recently, Wes, about the other corner spot for South Carolina. So you look at obviously OD Fortune coming back was big for South Carolina. You figure he'll man a spot. But at the other one, assuming everybody's healthy, there's going to be some competition. Judge Collier played a good bit this past season. Emory Floyd factored in. Vakari Swain could factor in. And then you look at the freshman class with Jalewis Solomon, a guy like Braden Lee, if they can hold off Maryland there. Those guys could get early looks. So I think Solomon's going to have an opportunity to contribute pretty early. And Wes, I think he could factor in maybe even more than we think right now, ultimately.
Yeah, and that's a spot, Chris, they really haven't seemed to, I guess, do a ton in the portal at cornerback so far, really the last couple of cycles. And so they offered, I think they offered Will Lee just because his nickname was Blanket, and they're just like, you
Right.
have to. But I don't know if he's committed anywhere else yet, but South Carolina not really involved there. Did he go to A&M?
A&M,
okay.
yeah.
I knew that was kind of, I guess, anticipated or rumored. But we had a question here, Chris, real quick. Zayden Walker, who is Jalewis Solomon's brother, number 9 prospect in the entire country for 2025, number 1 linebacker. South Carolina's in it. Is the thought there kind of not been Georgia for the most? Like, I don't know if it's a lock situation, but I know the big boys, Georgia, Alabama, Florida's been heavily involved there, I think. Everybody is involved with this.
Everybody. Yeah. No, Georgia, and I'm leaning pretty heavily on our guy Chad Simmons from On 3. He does a great job, obviously, especially in the Southeast. And Georgia has been where that one has been. But, Zayden was on campus with Jalewis toward the end of the season in Columbia. And that family tie could end up being helpful. So we'll see where it lands. It's still kind of early. Although he has considered committing early to a school, you would probably still give the edge and the momentum to Georgia. But the Gamecocks, I think, have a chance to move up there maybe. So certainly given the family tie, something to monitor, Wes.
Yeah, I got to keep an eye on. We got another question from Stickman. Stickman's a long-time listener. I don't know if I've seen him around here recently, so hope you're doing well, man. He asks, is Jamari Caldwell somebody that South Carolina's reached out to. I believe that's the Houston defensive tackle that is originally from Newberry area. And I don't feel like that name has really come up. Have you heard it pop up, Chris?
Not really, man. And, maybe it will. But South Carolina is still potentially in the defensive tackle market. But the guy, of course, that we've heard the most there is the guy from Pitt, DeAndre Jules, who might still be on campus. We actually got to run that down, Wes, as of 2:43 p.m. here on Wednesday, but was due to arrive last night or yesterday. And so he's kind of been the focus, it seems like. But I haven't heard that would make sense if they take a look there. And we get a general point. Sometimes we hear like, are the coaches aware of this and that? Yes. The answer is yes. Like if there's a player in the portal, the staff is going to take a look. They're going to watch the film. From there, it's just about what do they think, and then can they go, if they want to make a move, can they? But I have not heard him come up yet as far as being, hey, this is a guy to definitely watch at defensive line.
Yeah, Stickman says business is booming. Hey, man, if you got a business and want to advertise it here on the show, we'd love to have you. And also, speaking of business that's booming, check out our friends at Game Time and the Game Time app, also at gametime.co. Essentially, first thing that comes up, I don't think I'll be purchasing these tickets, but if you wanted to, you could. Georgia Tech versus Georgia men's basketball. Not exactly a top matchup, but hey, maybe you want to go see the Atlanta Hawks. You can do that right now for $30 all in. Game Time app, whether it's concerts, whether it is sporting events, whether it's right now. I know you have different Christmas events and stuff like that, comedy shows. Our friends at Game Time and gametime.co, Game Time app, the fastest growing app out there. And for a limited time only, restrictions do apply, but redeem the code Gamecocks and you'll get $20 off your first order. Also, the great thing about the Game Time app is that if you at any point find the exact same seats in the same section for the same event and you find a cheaper ticket, they're going to refund you 110% of the cost that you had if you bought it via Game Time. So that is the Game Time guarantee. Whether you're getting Gamecock men's basketball, women's basketball, baseball coming up, Game Time, our sponsor, and a great place to buy your tickets. Again, gametime.co. Shout out to them for helping us out and being a sponsor here on the show. John says I need to charge my phone. Yeah, dude, we're in the red. We're in the under 20. But all right, we're also in the under 20 here on the show, 43-minute mark. We got a little bit more to go. Jaden McGowan, Chris, making it official. I think he's one of those, you talk about guys that just kind of made sense. When McGowan went in the portal, or before he even went in the portal, when it was announced he was going in the portal, I think McGowan was one of those guys you instantly just kind of circled and said, hey, this would make sense.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. I mean, this is someone, Wes, that, sometimes you see in-state guys come back on the radar from the portal that, South Carolina maybe there wasn't as much mutual interest or involvement during recruiting. There was a lot with Jaden McGowan. I mean, 2022 class, I know you and I were there. We cover all the camps during the summer, and Jaden was there working out in front of the coaches, talking with Justin Stepp, ran a 4.3 something in front of a bunch of the current Gamecock players at the time, and they were kind of, eyebrows up. And a guy that they just didn't quite get to on the recruiting board, but somebody that they always liked. And so he ended up, of course, signing with Vanderbilt. But you said it earlier in the show, Wes, nowadays you don't get it. You either miss on a guy or don't take a guy. You're going to oftentimes have a chance to maybe go back and get him later now in this day and age of college football. And so kept a good rapport with Jaden McGowan. And now he's someone that's coming back home after he hit the portal. Made a ton of sense on both sides. This is someone that can come in and play some slot wide out for you, but I also think he's going to bring extra value as a kick return guy, Wes. He has in his career a long kick return touchdown. I think that was last season, and a guy with legitimate speed for sure.
Yeah, I mean, I think they've upgraded the speed certainly on offense. You look at, Jared Brown, a speedy guy. Somebody asked me on the board, what's his 40? I haven't seen an official 40 that's listed, but, I think he's probably a 4-4 guy. Jaden can run. And both those guys, I think, can probably help you in the kickoff or punt return game. So that's something to keep an eye on with both of them. And you really, dude, I think you just start to kind of say, all right, check that box, check that box. I think we've anticipated 3, maybe 4 portal receivers, depending on what else you do. I think some of that was in the context of, hey, if Bray Staley still wanted to come, does that kind of change the factor or factor into this? Obviously, at this point, Bray has locked in completely with Tennessee. But, I think right now, sure enough, if it's the right ones, you could see them take 4 portal guys. But this at least allows you at this point to be like, all right, we have half of those spots filled. Now you can be a little bit selective, but you can also be, your energy, like the logistics of it, is you can just focus on these other guys. And I think the key there is can you get some traction? Can you get some mutual interest with, like you said, a bigger receiver type moving forward? And I don't know. I don't know. Like I kind of just feel like there might be a couple of new names that are going to pop up at that position potentially as this thing goes on.
Yeah, Brazel is an option, Wes. You mentioned McCauley. South Carolina probably keep trying there. There's a Wake Forest transfer, Jamal Banks. Been pretty quiet on that front, but he's in the portal. I don't think he's gone anywhere last I checked. But guys that fit that profile, those are the types of guys that South Carolina is probably looking at. We probably should throw in Gamecocks are still going after a high school receiver in DeBron Gatling from Georgia. Really good, in my opinion, high school receiver, formerly committed to Texas A&M, visited South Carolina, later in the season, had a really good trip. He keeps things pretty quiet, but we think the Gamecocks are definitely involved in that one and will have an opportunity. So he's one worth monitoring too. But Wes, I think even if they get, let's say they could get Gatling, I think you probably still try to take a couple portal wide receivers if you can get 2 good ones. And like we've been saying, probably a couple guys that are in that kind of longer, bigger, rangier category for the next 2 if you can get them.
Yeah, for sure, man. And so we'll keep tracking that. We had a question about Cyrus Allen. He was originally scheduled for last weekend. Then it was, it's being pushed to this weekend. Last I heard, that was kind of up in the air as well. So, that's something we're going to have to kind of reconfirm if he's even going to visit South Carolina at all. And, so I think these things are fluid. These things are very, very fluid, I think, in terms of visits and who's going where. And so this weekend, we should have a lot better feel because there will be another round of visits really around the country. And I don't know. We'll see. We'll keep tracking it. I'm trying to think, Chris. So Jared Brown had already committed when we did Monday's show. So we've already given our piece there. We've talked Rocket. We've talked AdAway. We've talked McGowan. We've talked about the possibility of adding Howell to the running back room. Is there anything we've missed? I know what it is. The possibility of AJ Swan.
There you go. That's a good one. Good catch.
What do you think?
Yeah, visited yesterday. I think that trip went quite well. Wes, would say that South Carolina is the leader in the clubhouse there. I've heard a little scuttle about LSU being involved, possibility that he may take another visit somewhere else this coming weekend. But I think South Carolina's in a pretty good spot with Swan right now. And again, this is another one. Makes a lot of sense. A guy that you're already familiar with each other from the high school recruiting process. South Carolina didn't offer or push during the high school recruiting process, but you did have him in camp. And Swan's been here, and he's seen Williams-Brice Stadium in a game setting. So makes a lot of sense. And a guy that has some experience in the SEC as you try to build some more depth, some more competition, some more experience in that quarterback room as well.
Yeah, no doubt, man. Will ask early visitor list. I mean, for this weekend, really, Brady Hunt's the only guy you would say is like locked in.
Locked
I think.
in. Yeah.
Yeah,
There could
unless
be
I'm.
some others.
Yeah, I think. I mean, there will be. I think you can almost. Yeah, for people who are asking about Juice, go back, look at the 10-minute mark on the show, and we talked about that then. Luke says any future sophomores that could take wide receiver 1. I mean, you certainly hope Harbor just, spends all of his offseason kind of just dives into being a wide receiver and kind of takes that big jump and starts to match some of that potential. I mean, I think Tyshawn Russell still has a chance at a great future as well, but really, when I think of wide receiver 1 too, I kind of think of size, like we were talking about earlier. I do think they just need to upgrade the overall size on that group or in that group based on what they have right now. I don't see any recent questions. All right, I think that's going to do it, y'all. I think we covered a ton of ground. You got anything else, Chris?
Nah, man. I think I'm cashed out for now.
There'll be more. There'll be more later.
Plenty.
So, make sure you're hanging out with us on GamecockCentral.com. If you are not a subscriber, come on over. $1 for the first 2 months. Use code SCAR1. Come check us out. Again, it's for new subscribers only. If you've been supporting us for prior years, we certainly appreciate that. And appreciate every single one of you for joining us here on GC Live. Good numbers again. I can see them during the show. That it shows us exactly how many people are on here. A great number. So appreciate y'all. Appreciate the support. For Chris, I'm Wes. We'll see y'all later.